hopefully hear from the camera audio what I'm actually hearing in the room right now. What you may have seen me kind of overlay over that was actually, you know, what you hear as the final product. What I'm hearing whilst I'm actually playing is totally different. This channel is supported by TrueFire. TrueFire is an online library of lessons from some of my favourite players. There's thousands of lessons on there. You can use the promo code JNC40 to get 40% off of any of their courses. If you've ever wondered how my backing tracks and stuff and how I make videos and all that sort of stuff, this is kind of a video talking about some of how I approach this. As you might be able to hear, there's a click track happening right now. This is how every video starts. The camera's recording. I get a guitar, plug it in, and I start to play. And essentially you might notice that some of my videos basically start off with like a 2-bar phrase or 4 bars or something, and gradually over time they sort of loop, and then drums and bass sometimes come in and different stuff happens. I'm going to try and explain this as I go in case you're at all interested. Patreon's the place to get my backing tracks, by the way, if you like the way they sound. So first of all, there's a level of ambiguity that almost everything that I do has, and mostly in like C major, I'm going to explore for this. So we're thinking in C major. Now, essentially, I can create a backing track that I can play basically any chords to if I avoid one note. These things will probably mesh up okay. I don't need to worry about being like super specific, super accurate about stuff. As long as I'm not playing in C major, if I don't play the F, these layers should mesh okay with one another. Now what I like to think about doing is having parts that are like different registers of the neck. So my first part might be something simple up here. 2, 3, 4, 1. I try and repeat that sort of thing. So I've now got these 2 different parts happening together, and they were kind of up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And down here. Now, I'm going to leave those playing. I'm going to show you that essentially because I've avoided the chord 4 or the note 4, that I can play basically any chord under this and it will sound fine. I can start on chord 4, chord 5, chord 6, chord 1, chord 2, chord 3, even inversion, so basically the first layers that I put down are kind of just like these little sprinkly, maybe rhythm parts. You could think about them as sort of like the seasoning that are going to kind of do the jobs of like a synth in a normal arrangement, right? And then I might think about, okay, well, what am I actually want this chord progression to be? Oftentimes I won't start on chord 1. So chord 1 in C major is obviously 2, 3, 4. Okay, and that's quite a stable chord, right? It doesn't necessarily feel like it's necessarily leading somewhere. So I quite like my first chord to be something that's going to lead me somewhere. So oftentimes I'll be starting on either chord 4 or chord 5. So chord 4 be chord F, and then chord 5 be G. So back to chord 4. This would work for like Fleetwood Mac's Dreams, right? as I showed you before, the chord progression can really be more or less whatever you want it to be. The way that this layering stuff kind of works is like triads and spacious chords kind of stack together quite nicely. So if I'm going to show you something right now which is going to kind of imply like an F to a G, like I was just playing up here. There's an F triad, 1, 2, 3, 4, G triad. Right, so the bass line could, whatever is the lowest bass note is going to kind of sound like that chord. But you could have like, that lowest note could be an E or a D. I could use the relative minor, so it's an F triad, but a D in the bass, a G triad with an E in the bass. Or I could put an A in the bass, and that kind of sounds then like I'm going between like an F in first inversion, and then that's even got a really cool sound for that G. You see, what's really important here is that those things that I did at the very start, just by avoiding that F, means that I can basically do anything I like for the rest of the loop without kind of coming apart too much. Here I'm going from G, A minor, F. But you wouldn't want to have like several parts doing something similar, do you know what I mean? So you want to keep the parts kind of distinct when you're building this stuff, and if you're going to be doubling a part, really make sure you can double it, or if you're going to harmonize a part, kind of try and be a bit more close with it. But I'll now show you kind of the next process, which might be kind of just soloing over that, which is a similar kind of approach, and then I'll show you on the screen kind of building the track up around it if I can in some way. I'm going to need to think about how I do this, but yeah, that's kind of the start part, the layering, and then I go and do this, and then I kind of solo over it, unless I've got a fairly strong idea about what the loop is going to sound like together, in which case I may even skip and just start soloing over. Hopefully hear from the camera audio what I'm actually hearing in the room right now. What you may have seen me kind of overlay over that was actually, you know, what you hear as the final product. What I'm hearing whilst I'm actually playing is totally different. Okay, so I can't really screen share this part because that requires having a project running to record it. But here we've got like the section of loops. So basically, as I started, you have, so this is like a 2-bar section. So essentially I will just kind of copy it, and yeah, you kind of cut the section that you want, or that it is, and then press Control D on Reaper, so like this, and that's how I actually layer up these loops, so that you don't actually, I'm not hearing them as they go. And I've got some junk files apparently. This is the section where you heard in that video me kind of work it up to a full thing. So as you probably heard, I was actually just soloing to this sound. But then if you unmute these parts which are layered over, these are additional tracks essentially that are created from the loops that I was doing during that session. So what else I would do from here, I have basically templates that I would use. So for drums, for example, insert track from template, tweak drums. So these are things, I learnt this from Misha Mansell basically, that as part of his workflow, each time you kind of mix a thing, when you're happy with something, kind of copy it, save it as a template, and that saves you, you know, from repeating work too often. Not everything I do will be as efficient as that, but for instance, drums in particular, I use here Native Instruments Studio Drummer in Contact, and I also have like full Native Instruments. I'll show you some more of that in a second. So for drums, I normally start with like a 2-bar, and do I want it to be a halftime groove? Normally yes. Or do I want it to be, you know, like a... So I start with like the hats and the snare, so I think we'll go with halftime. With some drum programming, it's a good idea to maybe back off the velocity a bit, and that helps to make things not maybe sound quite as bonkers. Some ghost notes, and then kind of listen for where I want that kick to hit, because that can be quite a big part of the groove. Yeah, so you hear like that's kind of like a drum beat now, right? And then oftentimes I kind of think about where I might want an open hi-hat to kind of accentuate the groove. Okay, and I have them kind of both going through the same things. I think a CLA2, and I have 2 lanes essentially for like parallel compression. Okay, then I'll probably start the first drum part of the loop with a cymbal, and then program in fills if I want them. So fills kind of I did used to play drums for a little bit on my brother's drum kit, so I have some idea how drums work. I'm not necessarily too worried about it being the most accurate thing in the world. Okay, so then just select that loop again and copy. From the camera audio what I'm actually hearing in the room right now, what you may have seen. So we'll just work up this section which you hear in the video. I have this little trick which I don't want you to tell anyone, which is a little bit of a production technique to kind of fill out the upper register a bit more. I say a technique, I don't know if anyone else ever does this, but I have this bus here which essentially has like an octave up. and then Helix Native, but you could do like a reverb or something with this, and I would automate this to be off until the actual full track kicks in. And you hear essentially what that's doing is creating these airy type sounds. Supermassive I often use for this as well. Right, so that's kind of the sound of that. Okay, and then probably we need a bass, right? So often these days I'm using, I use a variety of basses actually. So most of them come from native instruments. So either Reactor is what I used to use quite a lot of. These days I'm also liking in Contact 7. So shout out to Native Instruments, I've used them for ages. I was able to get a hookup for the latest Complete, but I've been using them. I've paid for Contact 8 and 9, not Contact, Complete 8 and 9. It's basically what I've used for years and years and years. Right, so we've got Analog Dreams is what I use basically for a bass line sometimes. So start off with a, whatchamacallit? So that's an A. Then it's like it then goes down to an F. Okay, and then a G. But here's the thing, we could, even at this point, change things up a bit. So, as I said, the lowest note of a loop tends to sound like that's kind of giving the chord the flavour, right? So we could do this, right? So on the second repeat, I do this quite often. Instead of using the major, you can sometimes use the relative minor, and things will probably sound okay. Or even go from chord 5 to chord 2. So I'll show you those two examples. So that wasn't particularly loud, but I'll just show you again. Okay, so that would work, or I've got the option I could go to the chord 2. Because essentially, like, a lot of the chords don't have loads going on, you can be a little bit... So like this A could be a C. Or, you know, leave it as the A, and the F could be a D, and that would probably work. So you can kind of add in a bit of variety post in that way as well. I guess the last thing that I would do would be to come here, go to my, I've got this mastering chain essentially, which I actually turn almost all of this back off every time. So yeah, this is so that you actually hear quite accurately, hopefully, what my presets sound like. This is the only little bit of mastering here, which kind of takes things to most volume, and then I'm looking for I'm going to change this preset to be one of my more preferred ones. And because I'm recording in Helix Native, these sounds I can kind of change as we go. Like they were recorded all just in as it was happening, as you probably saw from the video. That's basically my process. So, yeah, hopefully that is somewhat illuminating to how things go. And then I just basically will render that. And yeah, I use DaVinci Resolve Studio to kind of edit these things together. That's how things go. I don't know if that was interesting at all, but that's, I think, about the best I can do to explain my workflow, my process for creating this stuff, and hopefully that's somewhat interesting. Cheers for stopping by. As I say, Patreon is the place to grab my backing tracks and request ones that you like the look of. In terms of the editing part, as I say, I use DaVinci. Take the files from the camera, copy them across. Obviously, managing all these files is a bit tricky given it's a daily process.